I did everything I was supposed to do, and when it wasn't enough, I realized the problem wasn't me. If you're new here, I was furloughed and laid off last year. I know I talk a lot about travel on this channel, but I think it's also important to talk about the life that happens outside of travel. So I've been navigating the layoff and trying to find a new job and all that fun stuff. And the reality is, at sometimes starting over from what feels like square one can be a lonely process. And it doesn't have to be by any means. There's always plenty of support out there. And I think it's an opportunity to network and find new people to support you onto your next step in your career, whether that's entrepreneurship or 9 to 5 in a corporate life. But coworkers and your quote unquote friends disappear quicker than you probably would expect them to. Even friends who are coworkers, or I guess in this case were coworkers, you realize that maybe what tied you together the most was the work, not necessarily the same work. I was a consultant, and we all had different projects, but we were still at the same company, and we were all consultants, and that really tied us together. And even though we knew about each other's lives outside of work and we're friends, sometimes those friendships really aren't gonna cross, I guess, into the real world outside of work. So a lot of times you'll find that unfortunately your coworkers and your quote unquote friends, they disappear quicker than you would have anticipated. I know there are people from my past job and role that I really expected to hear from again, even if it was just a check-in to say, hey, thinking of you, how are you doing? And how's the job search going? Is there anything I can do for you? And I have not heard a peep, which is a bit of a bummer, but it certainly kind of tells you, you learn a lot about people in the situation, and it's the unfortunate reality of it, but it's the reality, and you move on with that. So that's always a bit of a bummer. And I think in a way, unfortunately, you also maybe start to compare yourself to the people who stayed. Uh, I find I don't do that too much because I know who I am. I know what I'm capable of. And there's really no point in dwelling on something like comparison to the people who stayed, especially when it comes to a layoff. This wasn't by choice, and it wasn't necessarily, I can, well, seems silly to say, but it wasn't their choice to stay either. It was a choice that was made by leadership of who stayed and who went. And sometimes, yeah, I think you could easily fall into the trap of comparing yourself to the people who stayed and asking yourself, okay, well, why me? Why was I cut versus them? And that's certainly not the healthiest thing you can do. I think it's important to focus on your strengths and your skills and what you have to offer, and certainly what you are capable of. Because even when you're laid off, they may, they being the company, may have taken away your job security, but they didn't take away any of your skills, any of your network connections, any of the things that you learned. And that's what you really should focus on versus comparing yourself to the people who stayed. Unless you try to do it in a healthy way. If you're going to look at it and say, okay, well, this person that did stay, what do they maybe have that I don't on paper? And if that's a certification or years of experience, and maybe, yeah, you get a little bit better of an idea of what you could be doing to help prepare yourself for your next role in your job search, but certainly don't take it to a negative place. I don't think, I know that's not a healthy thing. It's not even about think. It's just not a healthy thing. But all that to be said, I think as well, you can start to feel a little bit lonely, um, and hopefully not isolated, but I can see how that could potentially be a thing for people. Because sometimes when you get laid off, you choose to take a less visible path, and that could look like all sorts of things. It's not necessarily taking the path of entrepreneurship. It could also be taking a less visible path of not immediately jumping into a new role. Maybe you take the time to really search for your next role. Maybe you take the time to go back to school or go get a certification. And a lot of times people don't understand that. They will not understand that. So you can feel a little bit lonely, a little bit isolated in a way. But on the flip side, as you're on the path that's less visible and maybe not as common for people to take, you do find the people that are also on a similar path. For me, for example, I'm going back to school and getting my project management certification, which has been so exciting. But I'm now in a room with, let's say, about 20 other people who are also on this less visible path. Some people are not laid off, they're still employed. I'm not the only one who's laid off in the class, which is a wonderful feeling to know I'm not alone. But we're all striving for the next thing and getting better at our jobs and our careers and building our skills. And it's it's uplifting, I guess you could say, to know that you're not alone. And it's another networking opportunity, and it's just it's a cool thing, and it's a positive thing. So all that to say, don't um try not to feel isolated. Find the people that are choosing a less visible path or choosing the road less traveled, as they say, and lean into that. You meet a lot of amazing people with ideas and drive and I guess tenacity that you don't necessarily find with people who are comfy and cozy in their 9 to 5. Um, yeah. So last bullet point I had written down here about this topic was learning to sit with yourself without distraction. Um, it's kind of a weird topic. I think maybe instead of distraction, I should have said comparison, which I've already talked about a little, but sitting learning to sit with yourself, I think is so important because it just helps you to focus on your capabilities and what you have to offer and what skills you could build, and maybe also looking at not only what you have to offer in your skills, but where you want to go in your career, what was serving you, what wasn't serving you, what worked, what didn't. Maybe there's something that you always wanted to pursue and you never had the chance, but now you're free to pursue that either on its own or find a company that gives you the opportunities that you wouldn't have had otherwise. So I think it's a beautiful thing to be able to really just sit with yourself and not get distracted by shiny objects, whatever those may be in your situation, but also to not compare yourself with others and just really stay focused on who you are and what you want from your career and your life, and move forward with that. It's a scary thing. It's an uncomfortable thing, but it is something that pays off in the long run. I've had that happen to me before. Some people probably call it manifesting, which I didn't feel I manifested it, but I've had that happen before where I really focused on certain skills as a consultant on my own that then led me to landing my role at the last company I worked for. So all that to say, really focus on yourself and think it through. Write it down, journal, whatever works for you. Find it to be so important. Yeah, those are all the bullet points I had. I'm always, I'm excited to have everybody here. I love talking about these different topics. I do a ton of travel. There's so much travel on this channel, but I do find it really important to also talk about life outside of travel and what my 9 to 5 in this case looked like, because I'm currently laid off, but what it takes to help fund the dream from someone who's not an influencer and doesn't get money from brand deals and all that stuff. I'm just a regular person with a 9 to 5 and just pursuing my dreams. So thank you for being here. Tune in, stick around, read the blog, subscribe, all that good stuff, and I will catch you on the next one.